I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I used to consider my life pretty damn perfect. I had a thriving company, a loving wife named Hannah, and a nice little home in a quiet neighborhood. We had been together for over a decade, and I believed we were as solid as any couple could be. At least, that's what I thought until I started noticing the cracks. It all began subtly. Hannah started coming home late from her yoga classes, claiming that they had started offering extra sessions during the week. She spent more time on her phone, giggling and whispering when she thought I wasn't listening. The change was gradual, but my gut instinct told me something was off. It felt like I was losing her, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. One night, I decided to surprise her by cooking dinner. I set up a lovely table with candles and her favorite wine, hoping to rekindle some of the spark we used to have. While I was prepping everything, I noticed her phone buzzing nonstop on the kitchen counter. Curiosity got the better of me, and I briefly glanced at the screen. There was a name I didn't recognize, followed by a string of flirty messages filled with heart emojis. My stomach dropped. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was some harmless chat with a friend or a coworker, but that little voice inside my head grew louder. I began to notice more signs: the way she favored certain outfits, her increased focus on her appearance, and the way she'd sometimes snap at me when I asked about her day. Tension was palpable, and it left me feeling uneasy. Then came that fateful Tuesday evening. I had to work late to finalize a project for a major client. I expected Hannah to be at home, but when I texted her, she replied that she was still at yoga. Something inside me snapped. I decided to drive by the studio to see if she was really there or if I was being played for a fool. As I pulled into the parking lot, my heart raced. I held my breath as I scanned the area, and then I saw them. Hannah was standing outside the studio, laughing with my employee Ryan. They were way too close for comfort, sharing a laugh that felt intimate. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was like a scene from a nightmare. My mind raced through a whirlwind of thoughts. Was this some sort of twisted joke? As I approached them, hidden just out of sight, I felt anger ignite inside me. Their casual banter and the way she looked at him made me feel sick. I couldn't stand there any longer. I stormed out from the shadows, confronting them both. Ryan's face went pale, and Hannah looked like a deer caught in the headlights. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. Hannah stammered, desperately trying to explain. "Jake, it's not what it looks like," she insisted, but I could see through her lies. The guilt etched across her face was undeniable. My heart sank as she spewed her excuses about how she was just helping Ryan with work-related stress. It made me want to laugh, but I could only muster anger. In the heat of the moment, I was a storm of emotions: betrayal, rage, sadness, and confusion. I could hardly process what I was feeling, but deep down I knew this was a turning point. I couldn't just walk away from this without making a decision. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with everything I had believed in about love and loyalty crumbling beneath me. As I turned to leave, Hannah grabbed my arm, pleading for me to listen, but I shrugged her off. In that moment, I knew I had to gather my thoughts and determine how I was going to handle this betrayal. I was not just going to sit back and let this slide. No, I was going to take control of my life and make sure those two would regret what they had done to me. Stay tuned for what comes next. The next few days were a blur of anger and confusion. I didn't want to see Hannah or Ryan, but I couldn't escape the reality of their betrayal. I spent long nights pacing the floor of my home, replaying that scene over and over in my head. Each time, the anger flared up anew. How could she do this to me? We had built a life together, and now it felt like everything was crumbling around me. At work, I threw myself into projects trying to drown out the chaos in my mind. But it was impossible. I could see Ryan's face everywhere, his smirk, the way he interacted with others, how he seemed so carefree while I was drowning in despair. I started to question everything I thought I knew about my company. I had trusted him, put him in a position of responsibility, and he had repaid me with betrayal. The confrontation with Hannah had left me emotionally drained, but I needed to think clearly. I couldn't let my emotions dictate my next steps. I needed a plan. I began to strategize how I would respond. I considered my options carefully. I could confront her again and demand her to choose between me and Ryan, but part of me felt that wouldn't be enough. I wanted something more than just a simple confrontation. I wanted revenge. Hannah always talked about how I had built my company from the ground up. She often said she admired my ambition and drive. But now, that very ambition felt like a weapon I could wield against both her and Ryan. I decided to hit them where it hurt the most, their professional lives. I began jotting down ideas on how I would execute my revenge without losing my dignity in the process. I gathered evidence of their affair, screenshots of messages, photos from that night, and any other information I could find. I had learned over the years that knowledge is power, and I was determined to use that power to my advantage. I could not only fire Ryan, but I could also make sure that everyone in our industry knew exactly why he was let go. No one cheats on me and gets away with it, and I was confident that I could turn this pain into something productive. As I crafted my plan, I reached out to some trusted allies in my network. I shared the news in a roundabout way, starting with casual mentions of my recent challenges, and then subtly weaving in the details about Ryan's unprofessional behavior. I wanted to plant the seed of distrust among my colleagues, making it known that he wasn't the employee everyone thought he was. It felt satisfying to think about how my actions would impact his reputation. Meanwhile, I continued to interact with Hannah, but it was mostly superficial. She would try to talk about our issues, but I would brush her off, keeping my distance both physically and emotionally. I could see the confusion and guilt in her eyes. She seemed desperate for me to forgive her, but I wasn't ready to let that happen. I needed her to squirm to feel the weight of her choices. One day, after what felt like an eternity of planning, the moment arrived. I called Ryan into my office under the pretense of discussing an upcoming project. I had already drafted his termination letter, and I felt a rush of power coursing through me. As he walked in, I caught a glimpse of the arrogance he had when he thought he was untouchable. That smirk faded quickly as I laid out the evidence before him. "Ryan," I began, my voice steady, "you've been a liability to this company. I can no longer trust you, and I'm sure you know why." His face paled as I detailed the affair with Hannah, watching as the reality of his actions hit him. The air in the room grew thick with tension. I could almost taste the fear that replaced his arrogance. When I finally handed him his termination letter, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. I didn't even let him respond. I simply ordered him to pack up his things and leave. It was pure catharsis. I had taken back control, and it felt exhilarating. The power dynamics had shifted, and I was no longer the victim in this situation. But my plan wasn't over. I had one last step to take. I still needed to address the elephant in the room, Hannah. I had to make sure she realized that I was not someone to be trifled with. I wanted her to know that I had moved on and that I wouldn't let her betrayal define me. It was time for a confrontation that would turn the tables on her. I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she realized that I was no longer the submissive partner she could manipulate. I was ready to show her that I could stand strong, even after her betrayal. Next, I would have to decide how to handle Hannah and deliver the final blow. How would she react to the news of Ryan's firing? Would this finally make her realize the gravity of her actions? I knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. I spent the next few days anxiously waiting for the right moment to confront Hannah about Ryan's termination. I had been holding on to that moment, anticipating her reaction, and I wondered if it would be the shock that would shake her to her core, or if she would simply blame me for taking away her escape. Either way, I was ready to stand my ground. One evening, after another exhausting day at work, I returned home. The atmosphere in the house felt heavy. Hannah was already there, sitting on the couch, her fingers nervously twisting a blanket. She looked up as I walked in, and for a moment our eyes locked. I could see the faint hint of regret in her gaze, but it was overshadowed by a defensive posture that told me she was prepared to fight. "Jake, we need to talk," she began, her voice wavering slightly. I could tell she had rehearsed this moment in her mind, but nothing she could say would prepare her for what I had in store. "Actually, I believe we do," I replied, matching her intensity. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I fired Ryan today. Her expression shifted immediately, shock, disbelief, then a flash of anger. "You fired him, for what, just because he's my friend?" She snapped, her tone defensive. It was almost as if she wasn't fully grasping the gravity of the situation. "No, Hannah, I fired him because he was screwing my wife." I shot back, watching her reaction closely. I could see the color drain from her face as the realization sunk in. "Thought I wouldn't find out. You thought I would just let this slide." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us, dense and suffocating. I could see the gears turning in her mind, desperately searching for a response. "Jake, please, you have to understand." "No, I don't have to understand anything. You cheated on me with someone who worked for me, someone I trusted. You destroyed everything we built together." I interrupted, my voice rising with each word. I felt the anger bubbling up again, but I couldn't let it overwhelm me. I had to stay calm, focused. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but instead of feeling sympathy, I felt resolved. "You think crying is going to fix this? You think that I'll just forget everything because you're sorry now?" I asked, trying to convey the depth of my anger and betrayal. "I wasn't thinking. I made a mistake," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I love you, Jake. I don't want to lose you." "Love? Is that really what you call this? Because it sure didn't look like love when you were with Ryan," I replied harshly. "You've been lying to me for months, and now you want to act like this is just a bump in the road." "It's not, Hannah. It's a canyon." Her sobs filled the room, and for a split second I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I pushed it aside. I couldn't let her manipulate my emotions. I had to show her the consequences of her actions. "I don't want to hear any more excuses. What you did is unforgivable, and I'm not willing to work on this relationship." "You had your chance and you blew it," I stated firmly. "You need to leave." Her face contorted in disbelief. "Jake, please don't do this. I'll do anything. We can go to counseling." "No," I cut her off. "You had your chance, Hannah. I can't trust you anymore. I need space, and I need you to understand that I won't be a fallback for you while you play games with my heart." I watched as she processed my words, the reality of the situation dawning on her. Her tears were real, but they didn't soften the blow of her betrayal. I felt cold inside, almost numb, but it was a small relief to finally stand up for myself. "Get your things and move out. I'll have everything packed up for you by the end of the week," I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked at me as if I had just delivered a death sentence. "You can't be serious. You're throwing away our marriage like it's nothing." "No, Hannah, you threw it away when you decided to cheat. I'm just cleaning up the mess," I replied, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. As she left the room, I could hear her sobbing grow distant. Part of me felt triumphant, but I couldn't shake the sadness that accompanied such a monumental shift in my life. I had made a choice, and now I had to live with it. The following days were a whirlwind. I focused on work, pushing through the pain of losing my wife while relishing the fact that I was finally reclaiming my life. I began to structure my company differently, removing any trace of Ryan's influence. I brought in new talent, reshaping the culture and environment to be better than before, one that would reflect my values and the vision I had before everything went wrong. I had taken the first steps toward not just revenge, but also rebuilding myself. I was determined to emerge from this heartbreak stronger than ever. But I knew the emotional fallout was far from over. I still had to process everything, and I had to fight through the emotional scars that Hannah had left on my heart. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it. I was not just rebuilding my company, I was rebuilding myself. And as I forged ahead, I knew I would come out on the other side, no matter what it took. The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of the situation began to fade, but the emotional impact lingered. I threw myself into work with a fervor I hadn't experienced before. Rebuilding my company became my sole focus, and it filled the void that losing Hannah had left behind. I had begun hiring new employees, all of whom were fresh faces that didn't carry the baggage of betrayal. With each new hire, I felt a sense of relief. I was determined to create an environment where loyalty and hard work were rewarded, rather than taken for granted. I even implemented new policies to ensure transparency and accountability, lessons learned from my previous experiences. It felt like I was constructing a fortress around myself, brick by brick, and it was empowering. But there were moments when the memories of Hannah would flood my mind. I would catch myself recalling the way she used to laugh at my jokes or how we used to spend lazy Sundays together. Those memories would often hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me momentarily breathless. I had to remind myself why I had made the choice to end our marriage. I had to keep telling myself that love shouldn't hurt, that trust should never be questioned. On one particularly demanding day, I received a call from my old friend Brian, who had always been a confidant. Over the years, he had seen me through the ups and downs of my professional and personal life. He wanted to catch up and invited me to a small gathering at his place. It was an opportunity to step away from the chaos of my life and reconnect with supportive friends. As I arrived at Brian's house, the familiar faces greeted me, and I felt a sense of camaraderie. The laughter, the stories, and the shared experiences eased some of the bitterness I had been carrying around. I shared the bare bones of my story, omitting the most painful details but explaining that I had gone through a rough patch with my marriage. Brian and the others nodded sympathetically, offering words of encouragement. But as the night wore on, the conversation took a turn. One of the guys asked about Hannah. "So, is there any chance you and Hannah might work things out?" He inquired casually, as if he was discussing the weather. That question pulled me back to the reality I had been trying to escape. I took a deep breath. "No, absolutely not. It's over. She made her choice and I'm not going back," I replied, my tone firmer than I expected. I could feel a mix of anger and sadness bubbling up again, but I pushed it down. The group shifted topics, but I could see the concern in Brian's eyes. He knew me well enough to realize that I was still grappling with the fallout. After a few drinks, the gathering broke up and I found myself talking to Brian privately. "Jake, I can see it's still bothering you. Have you thought about talking to someone, a therapist maybe?" He suggested gently. I shook my head, the idea feeling foreign. "I don't need a therapist, I just need to keep moving forward." "But you're human. You need to process this too," he pressed. "You can't just drown it out with work. That's not healthy." His words resonated with me, tugging at the corners of my mind. I had spent so much time focused on the external, the company, my revenge, that I had neglected my own emotional health. I realized he was right. I couldn't just ignore the pain forever. That night, I finally made the decision to seek help. I reached out to a therapist in my area and scheduled an appointment. It felt like a pivotal step, one that was necessary to truly move on. I needed to work through the layers of anger and sadness, and it was time to confront my emotions head-on. In the following weeks, I attended therapy sessions where I learned to articulate my feelings and process the betrayal. The therapist helped me understand the complexities of love, trust, and self-worth. I learned that healing wasn't a linear journey. It would be filled with setbacks and revelations. Each session peeled back the layers of hurt and allowed me to confront what had happened with Hannah. I learned to let go of the anger that had fueled my revenge and instead focus on rebuilding my self-esteem. It wasn't easy, but I felt like I was getting stronger piece by piece. As I continued my therapy, I also made strides in my business. With fresh talent and a new vision, my company began to thrive. I implemented team-building activities and encouraged open communication among my employees. I wanted to build a culture of respect and loyalty where everyone felt valued. I even organized a company retreat that focused on team bonding and personal development, and it turned out to be a major success. I found myself feeling more confident, more empowered than I had in years. I was no longer defined by my past. I was actively shaping my future. The memories of Hannah began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and ambition. But as much as I was moving forward, there were still moments of vulnerability. I would catch snippets of conversations about Hannah in social circles, and it would sting. I learned through therapy that it was okay to still feel hurt. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding a way to live with the scars. As I processed everything, I began to reflect on what I had learned from this experience. I realized that trust is sacred, and once it's broken, it requires hard work to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. I learned that my worth isn't tied to someone else's actions and that I have the power to define my own path forward. The journey was far from over, but I felt prepared to embrace whatever came next. It was time to focus on building not just my company, but my life in a way that honored my experiences and the lessons learned. I was ready to step into the future, ready to explore new relationships, and more importantly, ready to embrace myself. Little did I know, the final chapter of this saga was just around the corner, waiting to unfold. As I continued to rebuild my life and my company, I found myself in a much healthier place. My therapy sessions had helped me navigate the emotional turmoil that Hannah's infidelity had caused, and I was slowly starting to feel like myself again. I felt empowered and determined to focus on my future, but a part of me still grappled with the occasional pang of loss. It was during one of these reflective moments that an unexpected opportunity presented itself. I was attending a business networking event, something I used to dread but now approached with a sense of enthusiasm. I was eager to meet new people, share my vision, and expand my company's reach. As I entered the venue, I was greeted by a buzz of excitement, the kind that comes with the convergence of passionate professionals. I mingled, focusing on building connections until I stumbled upon a conversation with a woman named Sarah. She was confident, engaging, and had a quick wit that drew me in immediately. We talked about our respective businesses, and I found myself captivated by her insights and passion. It felt refreshing to connect with someone who wasn't tied to my past. As the night wore on, we shared laughter and light-hearted banter, and I could feel a spark igniting between us. By the time the event wrapped up, I had exchanged contact information with Sarah, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this could lead to something meaningful. For the first time since everything with Hannah had gone down, I felt hopeful. The prospect of exploring a new relationship excited me, but I was also cautious. I didn't want to rush into anything, especially after the heartbreak I had experienced. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I began to see each other more frequently. We went for coffee, attended more networking events together, and even explored some local art exhibits. With each interaction, I found myself feeling lighter, more open to the idea of love again. It was a stark contrast to how I felt with Hannah, where everything had become clouded by betrayal and hurt. But beneath the excitement, there was still a lingering fear. I was terrified of repeating the past. I found myself overthinking every interaction, second-guessing my choices. Each time I felt a spark of connection with Sarah, I hesitated, reminding myself that vulnerability could lead to heartache. One evening, after a particularly enjoyable dinner, we sat on a park bench to watch the sunset. It felt like a scene from a movie, perfectly picturesque. As the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Sarah turned to me with a serious expression. "Jake, I really enjoy spending time with you," she said softly. "I know you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here if you ever want to talk about it." Her words struck a chord within me. I could feel the walls I had built around myself beginning to crack. I hesitated, weighing whether to reveal my past, but I knew that honesty was essential for any future relationship. "I appreciate that, Sarah. I've been through a patch and it's hard for me to let my guard down," I admitted. "I won't lie, I'm still healing from a painful divorce. My ex-wife cheated on me with someone who worked for me and it shattered my trust." I watched as her expression shifted from concern to understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that, Jake. That must have been incredibly difficult for you. But I want you to know that I'm not her. I'm not here to hurt you," she said gently. In that moment, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The fear I had carried for months began to dissipate as I realized that Sarah wasn't asking me to forget my past. She was simply inviting me to be present. We spent the rest of the evening talking more openly, and it became clear that there might be a future for us. As our relationship blossomed, I made a conscious effort to be transparent with Sarah about my feelings and fears. It was refreshing to have a partner who was understanding and patient. She encouraged me to embrace the moments we shared together without the shadow of my past looming over us. Meanwhile, I had also taken further steps in my recovery from the betrayal. I decided to confront the last remnant of my pain, Hannah. I felt it was time to have a final conversation to gain closure and truly move on. After all, I couldn't step fully into my new life without laying to rest the ghosts of my past. I reached out to Hannah, and to my surprise, she agreed to meet. We arranged to meet at a local cafe, the same place we used to frequent as a couple. I felt a surge of anxiety as the day approached, but I knew it was necessary. When I arrived, I was filled with a mix of apprehension and determination. Hannah was already seated at a table, her expression a mixture of nervousness and regret as I approached. We exchanged pleasantries, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Thank you for meeting with me," I began, striving to keep my tone even. "I wanted to talk about everything that happened." "I know," she replied, her voice shaky. "I wanted to apologize, Jake. I can't tell you how sorry I am for hurting you." I took a deep breath, knowing that I had to be honest. "Hannah, your actions had devastating consequences. It's taken me a long time to heal, and I'm still working through it, but I've come to realize that I can't let your betrayal define who I am anymore." Her eyes glistened with tears, and for a moment I felt a flicker of empathy. "I never meant for it to get to that point. I messed up, and I wish I could take it back," she said, her voice cracking. "I know you do," I replied, my tone firm but not harsh. "But it's important for me to move forward without any lingering ties to the past. I want to focus on building my life again." We spoke for a little while longer, discussing the lessons learned and the paths we were on. It was a bittersweet conversation, but I felt a sense of relief afterward. I had finally confronted her, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my closure. Leaving that cafe felt like shedding a heavy weight. I stepped out into the sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in months. I was no longer shackled by anger or sadness. I was free to embrace the future ahead of me. As I drove home, I reflected on how far I had come. I had taken control of my life, both personally and professionally. The pain of betrayal had transformed into a source of strength that would propel me forward. With Sarah by my side and a revitalized company, I was ready to face whatever came next. I had learned that love could exist even after heartbreak, and I was determined to embrace it fully this time. I was on the cusp of a new beginning, and I welcomed it with open arms. With a renewed sense of purpose, I dove headfirst into my relationship with Sarah. We continued to date, exploring new adventures together and building a connection that felt genuine and healthy. I found myself laughing more, enjoying life in ways I thought I had lost forever. The shadows of my past began to fade, replaced by the warmth of new memories being created. As the months passed, my company flourished. I had implemented changes that not only improved productivity, but also fostered a supportive and respectful environment. The atmosphere was vibrant, filled with creativity and collaboration. I felt proud of what I was building, both in terms of my professional life and my personal relationships. One evening, after a long week, Sarah and I decided to celebrate by cooking dinner together at her place. As we prepared the meal, we laughed and joked, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of spices and laughter, and I could hardly believe how far I had come from that dark period of my life. As we sat down to eat, I looked across the table at her. "You know, I really appreciate you," I said sincerely. "You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think were possible." Her eyes softened. "I'm just being me, Jake. You've done the hard work, I'm just here to support you." After dinner, we moved to the living room, where the conversation flowed easily from one topic to another. At one point, I found myself sharing more about my past, about Hannah, the betrayal, the pain. But it felt different now. I was sharing as a way to reflect, not as a way to dwell on bitterness. Sarah listened attentively, her empathy evident in her expressions. "Thank you for being open with me," she said softly. "It means a lot. I know it can't be easy to talk about." "It's getting easier," I admitted. "I've learned so much about myself through this journey. It taught me the importance of self-worth and the kind of love I want to experience." Later that night, as we relaxed on the couch, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had come out on the other side of heartbreak, and while it had shaped me, it no longer defined me. I began to think about the future and what Sarah and I could build together. After a few more months of dating, I felt ready to take the next step. I planned a special weekend getaway for us, a trip to the mountains where we could disconnect from the world and focus on each other. I wanted to create a moment that felt significant, one where I could express just how much she meant to me. When we arrived at the cabin, surrounded by nature, it felt surreal. The air was crisp, and the scenery was breathtaking. We spent our days hiking, exploring, and relaxing by the fire. It was everything I had hoped for and more. On the last night of our trip, as the sun set, I found the perfect moment. We were sitting on the porch, wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cocoa. The sky was filled with stars, and the warmth of the fire flickered beside us. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "Sarah," I started, turning to face her, "I've never been more certain about anything in my life than I am about you. You've brought joy back into my world, and I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." Her eyes widened in surprise, and I could feel the tension in the air shift as I pulled out a small velvet box from my pocket. "I want to build a future with you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes, and she nodded, speechless for a moment. "Yes, yes, of course I will," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. In that moment, all the pain and heartache I had experienced with Hannah faded away. I realized that I had not only found love again, but I had also found a partner with whom I could share my life. Sarah and I embraced, the warmth of our connection enveloping us against the chilly night. As we settled back into the routine of life after our engagement, I felt a sense of peace. I had learned that betrayal could lead to growth, that heartbreak could pave the way for healing. I was grateful for the lessons learned, even if they had come in the most painful of ways. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that I now valued loyalty and trust more than ever. I had also learned that my worth was not contingent on someone else's actions. I had taken control of my life and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace new beginnings with an open heart. Looking forward, I was excited to build a future with Sarah, one based on honesty, respect, and genuine love. I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. In the end, I had transformed my pain into purpose, and I was ready to write the next chapter of my life, one filled with joy and possibility.